Well, thank you guys, and
Hi.
congratulations, first and foremost. Foremost,
foremost.
I know what it's like on a night like this. You're like, okay, we got this thing scheduled, and so you get, for a lot of you guys, got babysitters, you got cleaned up, some of you showered, and you got in the car and you kind of looked at each other and you're like, we could go to the event at church, or
Outback.
we've got about 3 hours and we haven't seen each other in quite a while, so why don't we just go out on a date? But you guys made it here, and thanks for your commitment to still come and still be a part of here. Just real quickly, we want to tell you a little bit more about us, but I would love to know who you are a little bit more. So just by a little bit of a woo poll, meaning that in a second I'm going to ask you to woo if it's you. So if you're a newlywed, give me a woo. All right. Anybody been any woos less than a year? Very nice. Good.
Nice.
They're still wooing. If you have preschoolers at home, not in school yet, give me a woo. Elementary age kids at home. Middle schoolers at home.
Those are the very tired woos
Yeah, they're
right
like,
there. That was
woo.
a tired woo.
Whatever, woo. High schoolers at home. All right. And here they come. Where are our empty nesters? Yes,
Yeah,
right.
that's the
They
loud.
are excited. And it's almost past their bedtime, so we gotta hurry. I'm just kidding. We love you guys. We all want to be you. We all want to be
We
you.
do.
Trust
We'll
me.
get there.
Great diversity of the
I
room.
know, I love it. Love it.
Let me tell you a little bit more about us. So this is us. Joy and I have been married 22 years. That is Ellie. She is our 16-year-old, and Josh is our 15-year-old. So we have two teenagers at home. And so you're looking at a pretty humble set of parents on stage right now, because we don't know anything at all, evidently, anymore. We
Our
have
IQ is
Yeah, we have
down
two
here.
drivers at home now, and so we're pretty dialed in on our prayer life. We pray constantly about that, and so if you have anything you need us to ask for you. But also, too, in our house, the most loved format is that is Mac. Mac is the only one that, as we say, scores 100% every week. He's the one that's 100% loved. He's 100% forgiving. He's the one that everyone 100% wants to see. We all have grades less than that. So Mac is our firstborn, and he's our love along the way, too. Also, too, for those of you that have little ones at home, we just put this picture up here for kicks, is that if you're like, gosh, that seems like a long way away, where you have high schoolers that shower and drive and do things on their own. Well, this was us just about, 12 years ago, 11 years ago, and it feels like just yesterday, because it does, as they always say, the days are really long, but the years go by really fast because they're really short. The days are long, but the years are short, and so wherever you are along the way. But the one thing that's constant about life and marriage, and we're going to hit on this a little bit tonight, and about life and parenting is that it changes, and it's constantly changing. And I don't know how you feel about it. Raul talked about it a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit about that maybe we drift from time to time, and maybe things change from time to time. For example, just as an example, when we were newlyweds,
It probably sounded something like this. This actually isn't ours because text messaging didn't exist when we were newlyweds.
For example, this is what a text in a newlywed was like.
Right. So you might say, "Hey, beautiful one, I was just daydreaming of you and I want you to know how grateful I am for everything you are." Right? That's what a newlywed would
baby
say.
love, so sweet and so ironic. I was just thinking the same about you. I can't wait to see you after work tonight. Where do you want to go to dinner?
Well, I'm up for eating anywhere as long as you are beside me. Boing, ding, smiley face. But that's what happens.
Some of you guys, if you're a newlywed, you're still there. God bless you. Hang on. You're
love
good.
it.
You're good. And
Okay.
that isn't a sad story or a bad story, but things do tend to change after a while.
Right. So this is what
In other words, it kind of changes to this eventually.
The upstairs sink has a huge hairball in it. May or may not be true.
Which allegedly isn't as romantic, but still.
But you got to quickly follow up and then say, "Oh, and can you swing by the vet on the way to pick up Timmy from practice? The dog needs more rash cream." That happens. And you would respond.
Oh, and I just got a text from Sarah Beth that said she needs to dress like Cleopatra for the book fair tomorrow. Do you know anything about this? And that emoji.
Right? All of this, so we say that by way of setup, just so that you know that we understand that there is a time of transition to go from one part of our lives that seems so sweet and sticky and ooey gooey to another part that seems super practical, and you're going to get things done, and you got to cut to the chase. But the question is, what happens in between? What happened to go from the first steps that we saw to the latter ones? And the truth is, what happened is marriage happened. Kids happened, jobs happened, life happened, right? We all get there, and it just feels like marriage becomes a little bit of like something that we're enduring a little bit, and we wonder, you can imagine, I can just imagine two people staring at it and going, what's going on with this? Is this even like fun anymore? What's the status of our marriage?
Yeah, and so we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight. And again, tonight our goal is really to be realistic. And so again, if you're like newlywed going, oh my gosh, we should have come to this. They had Cinnabons, it was going so well.
This is a downer, right?
We had Cinnabons, and it was funny, and Adam was great, and now they're up here telling us that, you're on borrowed time for your happiness. And so if you're newlywed, don't worry, you're good. But also too, time over time, you begin to realize things do shift, and they shift in seasons, and it's not always linear. They come in seasons, and there's moments where you feel like, gosh, why don't we do what we used to do anymore? You used to light up when I walked in the room, and now we throw logistics at each other. And we used to text, sweet nothings at each other, and now we're just all about, can you pick up something on the way home, or this kid's sick, or whatever else? What happened along the way? And so it's not a terrible story, but tonight we want to have a very realistic story. And part of the reason that I think Joy brings up the question of why do we stare sometimes at some point down the road into marriage, and we look at it and we're like, well, kind of what happened? Why are we looking at it differently than we used to? Well, part of this is because of our mindset about what marriage is. This analogy was told to me a good while ago, and it hit me in a season, I think, of our marriage where it really resonated. And the way it was described to me is that oftentimes in marriage, we can see marriage like a machine. In other words, we, date and we build this machine, and then we get engaged, and then we walk down the aisle, and we move into marriage, and suddenly we have our marriage. We have it there, and we set it down, hypothetically on our living room floor, and we flip it on, and then suddenly it's going. We're married. It's working. And we register for things, and we return things, and we have a first year, and it's been great, and it goes on. And then people start asking you questions that reinforce this idea. They start going, how's it going? How's it going? You're like, oh, marriage. Yeah, it is going well, And then there's other times where like, oh, it's not going as well. We're learning some things about ourselves, like one of us can't pick up the towel off the floor. One of us makes weird sounds in the morning that I didn't know that when we were dating, and now that we're living together, what is that you're bringing out of your body every morning? It's not going as well. And so we get into this view of marriage like this machine, and suddenly it runs well. We go on vacation, and it's a great vacation, or we get away for the weekend, and it's great. And oh, things are great. Oh, the needle is all into the green. And then we come back a few months later, and we're like, it's hard right now. And we get into this mentality of this thing that it works or it doesn't work. And some days, honestly, not to be too close to home for some of us in the room, but some days we're like, I don't know that I want to do it anymore. Or I've given up on it, or my hope that it is going to work has fallen away. As if it is something other than this living, breathing thing that is the two of us that actually in some ways have a agency and some sort of responsibility to make it healthy and to help it grow. And so the analogy that was brought to me was, okay, if you think about marriage as an it, something other than who you are, and your job is as a married couple to stand there and watch the needle and figure out if it's going well or not. Don't look at it like a machine. Look at it like a garden. In other words, marriage is a lot less like a machine, and it's a lot more like a garden. It needs to be cultivated. It's a growing, living thing that is susceptible to the seasons. There's storm clouds that roll in that have nothing to do with your relationship, but have everything to do with the world around you, and things happen to you from the outside in, and sometimes they happen from the inside out, and sometimes they happen in ways that are frustrating, and there's a cultivation that has to happen. And there's things that you do, there's weeds that you pull, and things that you work on, and there's seasonal things that make it better the next season. You have to water it and feed it and fertilize it. It's a living being thing that if we ignore it, it gets worse. But if we have attention to it, it gets better.
I was going to say, one of the things I love about this word picture so much is that when you think about your relationship as a machine, sometimes your expectations for when things go wrong is that you can get a mechanic in there or you can get something to tweak it and it's gonna fix it really right away. Versus a garden, for me, when I think about a garden analogy, everybody expects plants to grow differently. It's at a different pace than fixing a machine. And that's just why when we talk about this analogy, and we go back to this analogy a lot, is that things don't creep into gardens overnight and go away overnight. Like it's a time and a process versus with a machine, if you have that sort of engineer mentality, like I'm gonna approach this and I'm gonna fix it and I'm gonna get after it and I'm gonna read the manual and I'm gonna strong arm it back into working again. And so that word picture for us really just makes a difference in terms of managing our expectations. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and so for the next little bit of time, we want to talk a little bit about how when we turn our attentions away from the cultivation of our garden, we tend to drift, especially over time. We tend to drift away for some healthy habits that we want to look into a little bit more.
Yeah. So we'll start with just time management. We're going to talk about 3 big drifts in marriage that are not going to surprise any of you because time management is one of the biggies, the big drift factor. And it's just, it's basically we got busy. We just got busy. And we don't know how this happens. This sort of happens, in incremental steps, but it seems to happen to all of us. And again, some people wear busy as if it's a badge of honor. But really, it's just a lot more cancerous than that. And I think we can start by understanding our busyness if we just look at the quantity of time, the pure quantity of time that we have together. And when life happens, particularly I don't know if you've ever noticed when you start a new job, it's the best thing about a new job is you get a new email and it all seems like there's nothing there, right? You can manage your email. And then as time goes, right, it piles up, it stacks, it gets exponential. Well, the same thing happens when we give away our time. After we get married, it seems like, oh wow, no one's really expecting anything of us as a couple. And then we get a job, we get kids we get a job that makes us travel, we climb up the ladder, right? We're no longer the newbies, suddenly we're out of town, suddenly we have kids, and the kids have a schedule all their own. The school seems to have a schedule that takes into no account what the family needs to do. The quantity of time just is death by 1,000 cuts, and that's what happens in our marriage. Our marriage, we start to drift just because we don't have the pure volume of time. And I think it's Napoleon quote, that quantity has a quality all its own. Like in your marriage, you need the quantity of time, but you also need the quality of time. And the quality of time is something that also can go astray because when you're actually together, you show up and you're tired or you're irritated or you're a little addicted. I don't know if any of you struggle with the addiction, the phone addiction, or the game addiction, or whatever happens to be your sort of drug of choice. But a lot of times, the quality of time, even if we're next to each other, it's not great time, right? It's just we happen to be occupying the same breath area, and that's where time management can be a huge drift in our relationship.
Yeah, and as unromantic, as unsexy as it sounds, it really is amazing how much just the way we use our time fuels or starves our marriages. And in so many ways, over time, we lose track of how well we're doing. There's another one, too, that we drift along with. And this one, actually, it's ironically enough, something that we gunned for when we were dating, and it's familiarity. When you're dating at the beginning of a relationship together, familiarity is the goal. Like, let's go and spend time face to face with each other, sometimes with food in front of us, and try to figure out and become familiar with each other. Let's get to know each other. Let's discover parts about each other. And we're very generous in that season. When you're dating, things were quirky back then. That's a quirk of his. And now it just drives you nuts. And you're like, but the goal is, hey, we're going to become familiar with each other. That's really the goal. It's our, what can we know more about each other? But at some point over time, drift happens. And what can happen is that we just got used to each other. In other words, that the familiarity thing is that we kind of fell into a trap and drifted away, and we stopped really becoming fascinated with what was going on in each other's lives. We failed to study each other. We failed to wake up every day going, okay, I know I've known you for 3 years, 5 years, 15 years, 25 years, 35 years, but I think still God has something for me unique today. And it might not be about you, because I could almost complete every one of your sentences, but I'm going to watch you go through life and experience things, and things are going to happen to you today, and you're still fascinating to me, and I want to still study you. And it's whether we fail to study each other or we fail to celebrate each other.
Right, we don't say, oh, that's not a bug, that's a feature, right?
Yeah,
it's
right.
Like
The days that, that used to be so easy, but over time we drift away from this thought that I want to really celebrate you today. I really want our life to be this celebration for us. And it's any number of ways, just being able to celebrate the things that are going on with your spouse or the things that you love about your spouse and just reminding them stuff that they already know. I mean, it's funny how you still say, I love you. No one at some point says, I love you, and you're like, yeah, we covered that already. You said that. You've said that for many years. That's still something that we celebrate you. Hey, I'm saying that you should, not because I don't think you know this, but I want to remind you, I want to celebrate this. And it happens in any form or fashion. Words of affirmation, we get a little lazy with those. And a lot of times, words of affirmation and things we love about you move to the side in the name of logistics and things that, you got to change the oil on the kids and so-and-so can't find their cleats. That becomes our foreplay words for each other. You're like, how exciting is that to say, you text somebody, it used to be romantic, and now it's like, where are the cleats? Woo, wow, I'm all, whoo, that's great. But even in that same realm, the intimacy part of it, the time we spend together, the time we protect each other, even physical intimacy sometimes slides away because we've become very familiar with each other. And that's really what intimacy is. We trade out, we stop trying in some ways. The lacy stuff and the silky stuff that we used to wear, now everything has a drawstring. It's like, the words that used to be so cunning and coaxing that a guy used to say to his wife is now, are you awake? That's like it. That's like the whole gateway into intimacy right there. It's like, are you up? Kind of thing. So we stop trying so many ways. And part of this is because what true intimacy is familiarity. But in the familiarity, we've drifted. And we've thought, there's just really, they probably know everything I was going to say or whatever else. Or we tried, and do we even want to do that? It's a drift. And it's a drift that in the same way that drifting away from good quantity time or quality time together, it slowly withers the garden, which is marriage.
Right, and part of the reason we drift, the familiarity becomes part of the drift, is because for the third area that we drift, which really is about complacency. And complacency, here we go, is about we've just stopped growing together. We've just settled. And settling is comfortable, honestly. There's a reason we do it. There's a reason we become complacent. It's because it's our comfort zone. And we have also something there. I break it really into two areas. When we talked about how we were going to explain complacency, we really thought about it in terms of it's what goes on in your head, and it's what goes on in terms of your actions. And the first thing that happens is in your head is we stop being expectant. We stop looking at our spouse and going I wonder if they can be any different, right? We don't vision cast in our own minds. We don't think of something that expect that our spouse is ever going to surprise us or do something different or tell us a new story or tell a story in a different way or respond to me differently or somehow we stop. Because we're it's just easier to just expect them to be who they're always going to be. It's a mental work. But the other thing is physical work, which is we stop being adventurous. Somehow we just stopped exploring. We've stopped, getting out there and switching things up in all sorts of areas of our lives. And that's what complacency, how it contributes to the marriage drift. And we say all of these three things. The three things that we're going through here, it's not to discourage you, but it's to say to prompt some thinking in your mind to say, what is it that's going on in my marriage? And is there any drift? Because closing gaps is really what we want to make sure we spend the rest of our time doing, is about how you get that drift back on track.
Yeah, and so, obviously, at any given point, anybody that's probably been in the room, we could probably pass the mic around if you've been married for any extended period of time. You could probably tell stories to say, we never at any point probably have had all of these, but we've had seasons where this one showed up or this one showed up. And that's really, in some ways, what the management of the garden, the gardening of your marriage looks like. Because we really, I think for our next bit of time, we want to work under a couple of assumptions. And the assumptions really are that all of you in the room You want to enjoy your spouse and you want to enjoy your marriage. That's the reason that you went to the altar. Nobody stood at the altar and like, yeah, I guess. You were fired up and you're like, I'm in for this, and you still are. That's an assumption about you. You want to be better. Everybody in here says like, I want to have the best marriage. I want to be the best spouse, and not just for my own accord or for your accord. I really believe that God has something for us. We want to discover the blessing of God's design in marriage, because if God has designed this for us, it's a God-breathed thing that we really believe that he has something for us. And so when we think about these, we want to just assume together that we all want this, but we still face the wind and the weather and the rain and the pestilence that comes sometimes from these drifts that affect our gardens. And we all want to be people that have that abundance mentality. We all are people that in our marriage, not just individually, but in our marriages, attached to this Ephesians 3:20 passage, where God shows up and says, hey, in lots of different categories of your life, including your marriage, we have something for you. This passage, now to him who is able, God, who is able to do immeasurably more than any of us could ask or imagine, according to the power that's at work within us. We love that thought. We love to grab onto that thought that God actually has something for us, immeasurably more than we can even imagine. And I know some days we feel like we're getting it done, and marriage is about logistics, and it's about carpool, and it's about job, and it's about travel, and it's about broken pipe. But is that it? And that's a lot of what it is, but also, too, we hang on to this thought that God really does. I think if we watch for it and we cultivate our marriage, he has something immeasurably more for us, and it's probably something higher than what we're imagining right now. And what would it look like if we went after that? What would it look like if we started paying attention to that which will lead us to that immeasurably more? And we just want to suggest in our last little bit of time that there are some things that you can concentrate on. And tonight we share just a few of those.
Yeah, and so it's really about habits. And habits, when we talk about drift, right, again, those things don't happen just like overnight necessarily. I mean, sometimes they do. Sometimes there's big breaks. But most of the times it's little decisions. And sometimes little decisions can also lead us back to the place we want to be. I love the idea of there's this fact. There's this guy named James Clear. He wrote this book called Atomic Habits, which we love, informs a lot of our thinking. But he has this illustration where he talks about how if you get on a plane in LA and you decide you're going to New York, if the pilot sets the course 3.5 degrees off in Los Angeles, which is the equivalent of about 7.2 feet, right? Just at the beginning, 7.2 feet off, he's got a little bit off course. By the time they get to the East Coast, rather than landing in New York, you will be 218 miles south and land in DC. That's what just a little bit off at the beginning does to the long-term trajectory. Well, we would say the same thing is true with habits. So what we want to do today is just to encourage you in some little, simple habits. Little things you can do that are going to close the gap. That again, in a garden, it's going to take time. It doesn't mean it's the whole thing. But there are little things you can do to just sort of go like, yeah, you know what? I can do that. I can do the next right thing. So we're going to go through 7 of them, plus maybe one little bit.
And for you in the room, by your woos, we know that we have a really diverse room. So habits are interesting as they fall on your life. Those of your newlyweds, it's really a fun time. Joy and I lead a Just Married group. We love married groups. We were on our 5th Just Married group. And so we lead groups that have, I was going to say kids. That's the young marrieds that are been married for a year, 2 years or less. And so that's who we look. That's who we lead. And so habits is an interesting conversation for them because they're just now setting the trajectory. They're back in LA setting their degrees. And they're thinking, wow, we should get this right now because it's going to matter 5 years now, 15 years now, 20 years now. If we get good habits now, then we'll be set and just be correcting along the way. And then there's some of you in the room that would be in our category that you're like, we're 22 years in, and now we're just hearing it or discovering or thinking about or digging up the fact that I think we have a habit that we either had from the beginning or that we've slid into over time that's not so healthy. And if you're like, that's going to be really hard to change. And I just want to encourage you tonight to go that if you're somebody that's in that category, you're like, we've been married a long time, and this habit is not just a little scratch. This is a deep rut that we got to get out of. We see people do it all the time. And it starts with people going, you know what, let's decide to be different. Because again, this is what takes it away from that machine mentality going, I don't know if it would accept any change right now. It is just the two of you. And for you just to say, you know what, we're going to decide to not be that way anymore. I see it happen all the time with people that have been like, we're old dogs, we could never do anything different. You totally can, because what you're going to discover is how much that immeasurably more starts coming to you once you start changing these habits. So here's, like Joyce said, we've got 7 really quickly, and then one more that we're going to talk about. The first one, and these are small. So in other words, if you ever had somebody going like, don't you want to work on your marriage? So get rid of all of your media, kill your Netflix, make complete room for everything, and then you do all that, and then you like sit at home and you're like, I resent you now. It's like, so those are big steps, and if you do that thing, fantastic. These are small steps. So if you're like, just give me something small, because the goal is you do a small habit, it leads to a bigger habit, and a bigger habit, and a bigger habit. So these are all small, okay? The first one is this, and that is to find something to quit and replace, and this really has to do with time. You guys all have tried to stuff as much as you can do in the little bit of limited time that you have. You have to sleep some, you have to work some, you have to do things around the house, and then you have a little bit of extra time, and you're trying to stuff so much stuff in. And I know that about you because you're live and you're in Atlanta and you're married, okay? And a lot of you that have kids, I can guarantee it. And so for you to come in and go, let's do a few things that cultivate our garden a little bit better, I guarantee you're going to have to stop doing something to do something better. And so you might want to start with going, what could we put down for a season? And it might not be forever, and it might feel painful. But to say, we're going to make a little bit of room to do something for the good of our marriage. It might be a hobby that's like, hey, you don't have to kill it forever. I'm going to draw back on it a little bit just so I can make some space for us. For me, a couple of years ago, I was like, you know what? Saturdays in the fall, I need to watch a little bit more sports. It's easier now for me because I can pursue the one that
a little more sports?
That will take care of my heart instead of Atlanta sports that will break my heart.
He meant a little less sports.
Right. So, yes. But, these days it's That's true.
That was a Freudian slip,
but
I'm sure.
What did I say?
You said need to watch a little more sports.
Oh, I need to watch a little less sports. Right.
Yeah,
right.
This is where we were.
I'm still working through it. It's a deep rut. But it's easier. What I was going to say is it's easier for me now because I can say I want to watch a little less sports in the name of pursuing her heart instead of the sports that will eventually break my heart in Atlanta that I know will be the case. But it's that. But it's also it's making those deals with yourself to say, we're spending a lot of time next to each other, but we're both watching this show that we can't stop watching. And that we're kind of trying to stretch that to call that quality time, and it's not. And so we're going to watch one less episode and take a walk together. That's what it looks like. We're going to do something that says we're going to delete something out in the name of putting something in that we can distinctly say without guilt, this is good for our marriage. Because if you're trying to wedge it on top, it just doesn't fit right now. So you're going to have to delete something to find something better.
Right. Okay. Another quick, simple habit is date your spouse, not other people.
Yeah,
just
right.
Date your spouse.
Yeah. That's a whole nother conference.
Yeah,
a whole
that's another thing. And this really, so it's like, date night. Like, is there anything more cliche? Everybody tells us we need more date nights. The point of a date night is the fact that it costs something. It costs time, it costs, you've got to shower, you have to get a babysitter, you have to decide where to eat. We recommend doing 3, 2, 1. You name 3 restaurants, I pick one of them. Whatever it is that you find your pain point for dating, you don't stumble into it. You just don't. And that it's part of the quality and quantity time. If you don't actually plan a date, they just won't happen. Right? Maybe occasionally, but you need to have a steady drip of this. And it's just schedule it. Just schedule it. If you're having a hard time figuring out when you're ever going to be intimate with your spouse, schedule that. You don't have to be romantic anymore. You're married. You can actually just schedule stuff together. You can share calendars on Google.
I got a calendar invite about intimacy tonight at 10:30.
Okay, I'll accept. You laugh. You try this. Little habits.
Don't suggest a different time, though. That's like... Yeah. But to Joy's point, dating, it is funny that it's, dating, there's always an excuse not to. There's always an excuse to not. Mm-hmm. There's financial implications. There's, logistical implications. There's hygienic
implications.
Yes. You're going to have to shower and not... but you need to see each other
yes.
looking nice and dressed up for each other.
Yes.
And it's one of those things that, again, over time, you're like, no, they're committed. We don't need to do that anymore. Keep dating. Here's another one. Plan for connection time. And again, this sounds a little similar, but this is really about familiarity. And planning for connection time means to, in some ways, go back through your day and say, what are some of the opportunities that we actually can get a few more words together, a little bit more face-to-face together. And some of it might even be a little bit countercultural to the way that you're having to work logistically. So in other words, some examples of this might be planning for some connection time, going, okay, what are some times that during the week we find ourselves with a little bit of time face-to-face? Saturday mornings, actually, we probably could go out to breakfast. Or we could just, get up, instead of one of them turn on Sports Center and one of them does whatever, we actually, while the kids are still asleep or while they're taking a nap, that's our time to be face-to-face with each other. It could be one of those that you discover, wow, our logistical plan has been to divide and conquer everything. You do practice, I'll do this. You do that, you do this. Instead going, there's no logical reason why we should both go to practice and both sit on the bleachers and watch this incredibly boring practice happen. That's killing both of us at the same time. But to be able to say, but you know what? That's found connection time. We could actually go together, which makes no logistical sense, but makes all sorts of relational sense. To find the points where we can say, how can we be a little bit more connected to each other? And then the magic point is that when you get that time together, put the phones away and look each other in the eye and go, how are you doing? What's going on? Here's what I learned. Here's something that made me laugh. Here's something about our kids.
Let's talk about quick connection questions.
Yeah, so just for example, these aren't the magic 3, but just to have some connection questions in your pocket. Sometimes they're questions that are things like, what's something you're learning in this season? This season might be today. That's a good question, Something a little deeper than, so what's up? Or they told us we needed to be doing this, you go first. What's a question, what made you happy today? Good example, a little more specific question. This is an interesting question. How did you fail today? Joey asked me that question the other day, and I was like, why? Lots, I guess, But part of the heart of that question is like, I want to be your chief encourager. What was toughest today? Those are the kind of questions that fuel your connection time.
All right, this one's a quick one. Pray together in the mornings. What would you expect to hear from church, right? Pray together, pray together. Well, I have to say, we work in very different industries. And when I'm married to a professional Christian, right, a pastor, you would think that and when we got married, we're like going, we were going to do like devotionals in the morning, and we were going to be so connected to everything spiritually. And I got to tell you, it took us years to figure this out. The best way for us to do in the morning is to say like, so what's on your, what are you doing today? And he tells me what he's doing. He's like, what are you doing today? And I tell him what I'm doing. And then quick, right before we go out the door, we pray over each other. I go, God bless Billy on his meetings today and what he's going to do. And he says, God, I just ask for a blessing on Joy and for what is going on with me. Quick 3 or 4 sentences. And it seems like it is like the smallest of habits. Does it feel awkward at first? Yes, it feels awkward. You know what you do? You close your eyes and just hold hand. And then it gets over the awkwardness. You just say a couple sentences over your spouse. And there is something amazing that happens. First of all, you've got an empathy with each other that you don't otherwise have. You feel, as the person who's being prayed for, you feel cared for, you feel heard, you feel like somehow connected to your spouse in ways that go way beyond the 30-second prayer. And it is inexplicable because it's really only God, the connection that happens through that very, very small habit. And we were married for years before we started. It is not too late to start. And even though it feels awkward, just try it. Just try it. The other thing that happens is you learn what your spouse is concerned about. So it's like a twofer, right? You get a whole bunch of things done all at once just by starting this one little habit. I just can't emphasize enough what a game changer it is in terms of just connecting, just talking to each other.
Yeah. Real quick on again, number 5, and that is to shoot messages to each other. And again, this seems super simple. And when I think messages, let's just not think logistics, okay? You're like, yeah, we do a lot of logistical work. No, something a little higher than that. And part of this is in the name of continuing to have a consistent connection. We could talk for a long time. We really don't have time on this. But the heart of this really is the heart of intimacy, and it's the heart of relationships. There's a passage that it really isn't about marriage. It's a passage in the scriptures in 1 Thessalonians that talks about the heart of connection. And a lot of you have probably heard it. It's pray without ceasing. This is God's call to us to say, listen, I want you to pray all day long. And the logistical people in the room are like, how do I do that? I have to drive? How can I have work to do? How am I supposed to do this? And the heart of this is that I want you to stay connected to me all day long. I want our connection to not be relegated into Sunday morning or into your quiet time in the beginning. I want to be a relevant part of your day. In the same way that for some of you, speaking of connections, you grew up in a day where To go on the internet, you used to have to go and sit at a desk and then do a dial-up, and it made a weird sound, and then you had to wait for it to come online. And then now you're like, welcome to the internet. And you could do what you needed to do, and then you logged off, and you left with your information, right? Some of us remember those days. Now, we live in a world that our kids demonstrate all the time that we're constantly connected. You know, it's like they live in a completely different world where they know that they're connected all the time. We happened the other night. We're like, what's that actor in that thing? And, you know, we were just going to try to think it up. And they're all like, Alexa, Siri, you know, because their world, they're like, we stay connected all the time. And they're like, we're always connected. And so the reason with this, and I think it really speaks to the heart of what God's calling us to be in connection with him, but also in the same way at the heart of what a relationship is to not relegate our relationships to, and I know you realistically don't say, I'm just married in the off times of work, or I'm just married, on the weekends. You know you're married all the time, but there's so many times that we leave the house and we leave the thought of each other. And shooting messages means is, hey, during the day, I shoot you encouragement just to say, I think you're awesome. No reason, no explanation, just I think you're awesome. Sometimes during the day to say, having a tough day. Can you pray for me today? Or being able to touch base with each other and to say, hey, I want you to know I'm going into this situation, or this thing happened at home, or hey, here's a fun picture. To be able to have a relevancy in marriage, to know that your job will change, you could get fired, you could be replaced, but you have one relationship to cultivate and connection, daily, all the time connection, and that is your marriage. And to do that, honestly, you live in a world now where you can stay connected to each other all day long through the same little devices that our kids stay connected to the internet.
And gifts count. Feel free.
Yeah,
have fun with it.
Have fun, shoot messages to each other, and make your lives relevant all the time.
And then I think that the final, well, not the final thing, the sixth thing is to pray to be used and then pay attention. There's something powerful as a couple when you go out in the world and you say, like, God, I just really want to be used. I want to be used in a way that makes a difference and that has a purpose as a believer, as somebody who is, participating in my life and participating in the human race. But a lot of times what we do as couples and what we do as individuals is we're out of the habit of praying. We will pray and say, God, use me. God, sometimes I find myself doing this. I'm like, God, just really, I'd love to just be a light in the world. Right? I'd love to just go out and just live for you and make a difference. And then what happens is I get in my car and I go to the airport and I show up and there's this line and then there's the TSA agents and everyone's in my way and I'm like, oh, get out of my way so I can go and be a light in the world in this place that I'm going. And I'm missing the fact that I should pay attention to the people around me right then and there, right there. And as a couple, when you start to do this, when you start to say, together what we're going to do, we're going to pray and we're going to look to be a light in the world and we're going to actually show up in the world looking for ways to make a difference, looking for ways to invest in other people, looking for ways to encourage other people, looking for ways to connect. All of this about our prayer life. The backside of that is about paying attention and showing up to wherever God is leading us.
Yeah. And the last one, and it really does, it vaults off of that, the fact that we really do believe that as a married couple that God has something for you as a couple. And that he has one of the greatest pleasures for you in being able to walk into the world and go, I'm going to send something in front of you today as a couple, or something on a long period of time where I want to use you to bless the world around you. And sometimes it's praying those things that come and surprise you during the day, but sometimes it's serving strategically together. And that means, and again, those of you that are group leaders in the room, those of you that serve and volunteer together and to serve, and whether it be formally or in here or somewhere else, to be a couple that says, you know what, we can't have everything flow into our marriage. We have to stand arm in arm and go, you know what, God has placed us here for us truly to be a light to the world, so that we can be an instrument. And there's something about that, serving together, that again is hard logistically. You don't have time to do it. It's extra energy, it's extra focus. But I guarantee you, when you look out and say, we're going to walk into the world and try to help, there is something that pulls you together closer in marriage. Because when you pour everything, and everything about you is blessing us and blessing our marriage, you become like the Dead Sea. That everything flows into it and nothing ever flows out of it and nothing survives or lives in it healthily. So that's the goal, is to figure out what are we doing to strategically serve, which again, there's thousands of opportunities at Gwinnett Church. There's opportunities around you. Again, it's informal. It's your neighbor down the street. It's this thing. It's that younger couple that's behind you. Just a few steps that you could turn back around and be a little more strategic to pour into their life. Or it's just volunteering and doing something, but serving somewhere together. And in that, you'll find a lot of ways that God breaks your complacency. Last thing, and we're done. The one thing that we were going to say, we have one more, because it's simple, maybe. What got you there isn't simple. It's not easy. And this is for those of you that might be in the room tonight that you're like, listen, this has been funny and fine, but we're in a situation, we're at a lot more of a drift than a drift. You know, we're discovering now after some time together, or we're in a rut, or we've uncovered hurt from our past. Maybe it's our family origin. Maybe it's something we did to each other. Maybe we're digging stuff out of who we are. Maybe something has happened catastrophically in our marriage, and we broke trust, and it broke the health of our marriage. And we're here, and we're on life support. First of all, I want to say, thanks for coming and being a part of this and being people that's like, nope, we still feel like God has something for us in our marriage. And seeing that you are gardeners, but your garden's in a tough spot. I want to firstly encourage you to say that if that's you tonight, that as a pastor, one of the good things about being a pastor is I see a lot of stories. And I've seen marriages fall completely apart, and then two people face each other and say, let's put it back together. And they do. And there's not too far gone if you're willing to still show up and work on it. And if that's you tonight, we just wanted to mention that Gwinnett Church has an incredible care ministry. They have incredible resources to a counseling network. All you have to do is take a step, call Gwinnett Church, email Gwinnett Church, and say, let me talk to somebody in care ministry. That's the first step. And that step is inviting somebody in to what's going on in your marriage and to be able to help you out anyway. So I just want to encourage you to do that. Because if you're in a spot, there is no too far gone. And you're surrounded in a community that is for you and wants you to succeed. And they've got so many resources and have vetted so much good stuff to help you invite somebody in for the health of your marriage. So with that, we want to give you a couple of questions that we're going to actually send you. You're going to get sent to a little bit later on, I think actually tonight, and it's for you to process together.
Yeah, so I'll just quickly read them to you so that you know what they are. The first really is the bucket of time to process this with your spouse. What specific changes do we need to make to the quantity or the quality of the time we spend together? And the second question is, what do we need to stop doing so that we can start doing something better for us? In terms of familiarity, the questions are, what most hinders our connection time these days? What is one specific idea to create a more consistent time of connection or enjoyment of each other? Again, these are all going to come your way. And then finally, complacency. If God's truly offering us multiple opportunities to be used in exciting and new ways, what most likely causes us to miss them? And then finally, what about our personalities or lifestyle is apt to keep us from joining God's adventure?
So those questions are for you to process later on. Let me pray for you, and then we'll keep moving. Heavenly Father, we're so grateful for this crew. We're grateful for the ways you're working in their lives. And Father, wherever we are, if we're on the front end of marriage and we're looking into very strategically into marriage, just help us to be all about the habits that draw us closer to you and also closer to each other. Father, I pray for the ones that are in the room that have realized that, wow, we've been through a season of drift, or we very much know that we're gardening and trying to keep it healthy. I just pray strength and wisdom and endurance on them, Father. And I pray for everyone in the room that we might be able to be marriages that walk out into this county, out into our city, and be lights unto them. Father, we're grateful that we have a message of hope. We have a message of redemption and salvation in Jesus. And we pray all that in his name. Amen.
Amen.